Welcome to the Krystal Effect. I'm your host, Krystal Appleby, and I'm here to share honest, wild truths I've learned through being a practitioner for myself and others on this crazy journey of life, career, and relating. I'm not crazier, braver, bolder, or more experienced than others. Rather, I do believe I'm here to share with a deeper level of honesty than most. It's just who I am. Superficiality and mediocrity are pure boredom here, and I do believe the deepest truths and depths of our soul will set us and others free. With an allergy to anything withheld in connection and conversation, we're going to dive right into any limits or lies we tell ourselves, pierced through the mediocrity or fears of diving deep into the truth. I hope to give you an opportunity to reactivate your knowing and zeal for living, rather than to be triggered, squander life and joy, and shrink away out of my energy field. But as always, choice is yours. Let's dive in. Welcome to episode 8 of the Krystal Effect. This one is a solo episode. I'm going to try to keep it short. There's just something on my heart that I'm moving through right now that I really want to bring to the world and just share, because we all go through it. And I think sometimes we try to rush through it. We try to think that we're not supposed to be in it, that we should hide it and tuck it away. And this is the death cycle. This is the death and rebirth cycle that we go through over and over and over in our life. This is a place that I have been so many times the last year to 2 years, and have not always gracefully navigated, but have definitely learned through, and excited to just share a little bit of my experience on. So recently, I've been going through a process with my dog, which is literally, so when we talk about death and rebirth cycle, what I believe is that all of these cycles that we go through in our life, from, death to rebirth, and then becoming the fool and moving through the cycle of, this new level that we're playing in, learning to navigate it, learning to master it. And then as we start to master it and get to a stage where we feel really comfortable, we're really excited to, be where we are, to feel in this state of like wisdom, mastery, then all of a sudden out of nowhere, there's this opportunity to die and rebirth into a new cycle and a new level of who we're here to become, if we allow ourselves to constantly grow and expand. And if you're here, I'm hoping that that is the case. So I digress. Recently, I've been going through this cycle with my dog, and she is just like this physical example and tangible experience of it. As she's 13 years old. She just opened her eyes after snoring for an hour, because that's how in tune she is. But she's sick, even though visibly she's on steroids and she's running around loving life. But just a week ago, we were talking about putting her down and, living through this very tangible, visible experience of death happening, of things shutting down, of, the necessities that we need to survive and to live starting to be restricted. So, stopping eating, not being able to pee. And like the gist of it is she has an aggressive form of lymphoma, and it's cutting off something in her bladder. So she wasn't able to pee. So not that I needed to share all of this, but here we are. Through this process, she initiated me into my own freaking process of death, letting go of these old constructs, of this old way of doing career and all these things. Because as this started happening, I was up north thinking that I could just force through and go back and treat, because that's what I logically wanted to do. I'm missing my community. I want to still have that access to my people, still be involved in Saluna, and still make money in this way that I feels comfortable and safe to my nervous system as I navigate moving into a new direction. So as this has been happening, that's taken away. There's no option. There's the option of, I'm not willing to have this happen up there without vets, without these things. So we pack up and we leave. And while I'm watching her decline over the course of, 5 days or so, a couple of weeks ago, I'm witnessing myself go through this, because there's the reality of it. It's like, when did this cycle start? Okay, when the vet called and told me what was the tangible facts happening. To this point, we'd kind of been not been given any answers. Nobody understood what was happening. And I was being my Dr. Woo-Woo self, because I'd been given permission from all the vets to put her on 50 things. And then all of a sudden we had an answer. So when we have this fact in the physical world that does something to our system right there. And I knew if I want this dog to live longer, to make the most of the time she has here, I need to get my shit in order, or there's no way. Because once I get in my mind, I'm done. She is the most energetic being, and then she picks up on everything going on. So we're just mirroring back and forth, just like we do in every fucking relationship that we come into contact with in our life. And she went from being, mostly fine, having some issues, to like totally neurotic, not peeing at all, not one drop overnight. Parts physical for sure. Mostly energetic, her picking up on my stuff as I start to like grieve and go through my own process of the reality of what's happening. Absolutely. So this is happening in our life all the time. It doesn't take cancer. It doesn't take, somebody physically dying in our world for us to be mirrored back to this opportunity to grow through the part of the cycle that we're in. And we're always going through pieces of the cycle. This is why I love tarot cards. It's not, it's simply because it shows a cycle. If you look at the major arcana, it goes from the Fool to the Magician to, oh my goodness, why can't I remember? It's, it's like a birthing process, but then death is a part of the cycle. Judgment, she's rising up out of like the phoenix out of the ashes, essentially. That's a part of the cycle. I used to pull cards and get upset or fearful or whatever, but you're just being shown what part of the cycle you're in right now. And we're always moving. We don't sit in these parts of the cycle for years. We're constantly moving and transitioning to the next piece of the cycle. That's necessary. That's normal. That's growth. Even if you want to stay stuck, you're still going to be pulled in through these different pieces of the cycle. So I share this because these transitions are hard. They're simple, but they're not easy, and they're hard, and they're necessary. And I believe they're preparing us for, the final time that we go through this cycle in our life and take our last breath. How peaceful and easefully do we want that transition to be is reflected by how we show up in these cycles in our life now. When it's time for a relationship or a dynamic or your career or, whatever it is, whatever's being brought to you to end, when it's just the course is run, how do you show up? For me, not so well usually. But this is something that it's like we work on, we bring awareness to. Like when this came up with Reese, I'm looking at her and thinking, okay, this is what's going on in my life. I'm being asked / demanded to let go of this piece of my career that's been very comfortable and stable for me. But I knew for the last probably 1.5 years, 2 years for sure, that there's an ending coming. So we're given a choice, for 1.5 to 2 years on how we want to transition out of that. You're given the knock on the door, the awareness. It's the same thing happened when my last dog died. I walked into the clinic I was working at and knew it was time to go. And I asked for 3 months. I asked for 6 months. I demanded more time. But the thing is I had already been miserable for a year. So this is where I say I'm not always the best with transitions, because when we know, we're given that grace period to lean in and start to allow this transition period, to allow these parts of the cycle to move through us, so that when the death card comes, when that phase of the cycle comes, there's a level of preparation. There's always going to be fear, for sure. But there's a level of preparation so that the letting go isn't harsh, abrupt. For me, it was like, with Reese showing me it was time to go, is literally that morning I woke up at 6, packed my stuff up, and had to have my manager call my clients and cancel the next 5 days, knowing that this may be the way that I leave my practice. This may be the end. I don't know if I'm coming back ever in this capacity. That's not super comfortable. That's not super easeful, celebratory. These transitions are normal. The death cycle is normal. It's normal to move on and go on to things that are different and pulling at your heart in a different way, right? But when we kind of outlive these stages and allow and make life get really fucking loud for us, then all of a sudden we're put in a position of choices taken away from us. My choice was obey and listen now and move now and trust, even though you're but I want money. I want this. I need this. I can't wrap it up like this. Or have some major fucking regrets. And this option I've done with my first dog, and I will never do again. So, we moved through that cycle, and then coming back to where I knew I needed to be with her in the mountains, and believing, like, I thought within a couple days she would be gone, and allowing myself to be in that part of the cycle with her is where I really wanted to dive into today, because I thought I was not ready, but I knew I could show up in a way that was correct for her. I knew I could be strong and help her through this transition. But here's the thing. I didn't want to see her suffer. I don't like seeing or feeling myself suffer in this phase of my life. And I sure shit didn't want to see somebody whose body was starting to shut down and fail her suffer. So what did I do when this happened? I forced transition on her. I started doing Reiki. I started giving her drugs. My dog and I do not do well with the medical system. And it's not that I'm against it. I'm there for it where it's needed, but I've put her on antibiotics. We've done all these things and they typically don't work. So as I'm forcing my dog to move through this cycle, as is comfortable for me, I'm staying up at night, holding her, breathing, doing the things that I did with my last dog that I was there for as he prepared to pass over. I just, he was so ready. He was like, it's time. And I could feel it as I was doing Reiki. The energy centers were disconnecting. The chi was leaving his body. The density of the energy was starting to get sparse and chaotic as it left his system. I could feel his soul leave his body when it was time. So, well, I've been here before, so I'll do this again. So I tried to do the same thing with her. And there was this huge resistance, this huge panic in her system. And I just thought like, oh, this Aries is just like, doesn't want to go, but you got to go, girl. Like, this is horrible. There's so much better for you on the other side. Until, I overdosed her on gabapentin. I was like, maybe it'll slow down her heart because her heart was doing some things. And I thought maybe it would make it easier for her to transition. And when I did that, she got so lucid and she only became more terrified. The more that I allowed her to be detached from the physical, the more terrified she got, until I finally realized, like, this dog doesn't want to go. She would just like, her eyes would glaze over. She'd start to slow down her breathing and start to disconnect. And then she would just jolt back into her body with this panic. And that's when I realized that I was literally trying to kill my dog for her so that she didn't have to go through the process that I thought she shouldn't have to go through. Meanwhile, she was not ready to die. So through all of that, we needed to get her to a certain day so that she had a certain amount of days with medication out of her system so it wouldn't destroy her stomach lining and risk her bleeding out before we could start her on steroids. So things were getting worse very rapidly, and I just thought that there was no way she would get there. And then she did. She was not doing well. She was not doing much by the day that we needed her to get there. But she also was not going with my forceful, energetic death attempts, let's call them. So at some point I realized, shit, this dog doesn't want to go. And this is her journey. This is not my journey. And I don't get to choose. This is her journey. I do get to choose, I guess, essentially. I could have called a vet and made that call, but it made me really step back and think that this is how I want to show up in my life. I don't want to, when things get uncomfortable, when conversation or life gets really sticky, I don't want to call 911 every time. I've been there. I've been that person. I don't want to take the exit every time life comes to this place, every time we're presented with the death card. I want to learn to embrace it and get curious about it and not always assume what it has to mean for me or others and rewrite that narrative. So through this process, I was going through my own process in my own life of like, what's going to happen with my practice? What am I going to do with clients? Is this what I'm being asked to do? Do I have to let it go? Like, do I have to let her go? How long is she going to stick around? We got her on the drugs and she made like a massive turnaround within 6 hours. And that's great. And that's exciting to see that. And honestly, we all were shocked and never thought that that was even a possibility of her bouncing back like she did after how the state that she was in for the amount of time that she was in that state. And even in that, there's a process. So we leave that death cycle. We don't know for how long. We don't know when we're coming back to it, right? But in that moment, I was brought to this truth of like, well, fuck, now what? So now I want to go make money and now she's around and I can't leave her. Like, how long is this process going to go on for? How long is she going to be here for? And started like, you start to see how the human grips to every fucking thing and wants security and like knowingness, even when it's not an outcome that we want. Like she inevitably has to go through this process. But what if she has 3 more life cycles before she actually is ready to go? That's not for me to decide. But it brings up in my system all of these things of like, okay, now I want to go back to acupuncture, but like now, how long am I going to be off? How is that going to work? Da, 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 da. Instead of just being present, what is life asking me to be initiated into? And that is the question I'm sitting in right now. What is life initiating you into? I haven't been fully happy in my acupuncture practice for years. And I've played Tetris and shifted things, added different things to try to like make it more personal, more me. And, you know, my practice is, if you've seen me, you know, it's unique. It's not like somebody else. It is me. Sometimes we talk about your money belief. Sometimes I just put needles in you and make the muscles twitch. And then there's 30 different variations in between. And I love that. And I'm proud of that. And it's comfortable. And it's gotten to a place where it's just not correct anymore. So then what am I being initiated into? And how easy can I allow that transition to become? Do I have to fight it like I fought Reese when she didn't want to die? So now life is asking me to let this go. It's giving me this beautiful reminder in front of me that like, hey, I'm here to be with you. And like life is, you know, finite and everything's finite. And like, this is probably the perfect opportunity for you to make a leap and like really go all in on yourself and what you actually want to do with your mentorship and the Krystal Effect and these different avenues of your life. So are you going to fight that next transition? Are you going to sit in it and fight against it too and say how it's unfair, or, you know, try to problem solve and reroute back to the original neural pathway? Or are we going to actually like fucking go in and start digging a whole new trench? And that's really what I wanted to come on and talk about today, is just like, at what point do we get tired of those transitions being so gritty and so sticky that we start to allow life to flow through us, that we start to say, okay, move through me. I know I'm here to be of service. I know I have a big purpose. I know there's more for me to do in this world, but I need to detach and let go of desire. Because here's the thing, I desire to have massive income. I desire to have a lot of things in my life right now, an oceanfront home, the partner, the this, the that. And that's not what life is presenting me in this moment at all. And if you are in my world, you know, it's quite the opposite. This is a year of like, there is so much pressure put on me, not just by me. So many different things in my life are demanding more than has ever been demanded of me. So do I want to continue to fight and try to tell life how it's supposed to go and the timeline of what it's supposed to go on? Or is it time to let the transitions do the work that they're here to do, to clean out what they're here to clean out in the timing that they're here to clean it out, and then be with whatever's left? That death process that Reese and I went through cleaned out a lot of shit. And it didn't clean out her out of my life like I was terrified that it was going to. So now with new awareness, I get to travel this new cycle with her and not knowing, like totally present, not seeking forward like we were before. That like all of that gripping that I was doing the last year to her as I knew something was off in her body is no longer there. I know what's going on. I know the process. I know the doctor's prognosis, and we've already outlived it. So we're just here being present. And she's just teaching me, like, are you going to build a business the same way you did before while I sit in the corner here and you have no time for me? Or are you going to simplify the shit out of it because you know you're here to build a new extension of your business and you're here to be present with your best friend with the time that she's left here? So obviously this story is mine, but I want to invite you in today to that same place in your life. What part of the cycle are you in? Are you newly initiated into this new area where you're feeling uncomfortable and you haven't learned how to navigate, whether it's a new job or, becoming a parent or whatever initiation you're in? Are you somewhere in the middle where it's like you're slowly starting to shed old layers and like emerge as the truth that you are? Are you being asked to like die and let the fucking old structures just tumble? And are you ready to receive what's on the other side? Because you do also have to prepare yourself and your body and your nervous system and all of this to receive, right? And that's something that before I wrap this up, I'll touch on that through this whole process, through everything that was happening, through like being terrified and messaging my friends like, hey, pray for me, like Reese is ready to go, all of these things, which was very real truths at the time. Well, no, I don't know if she was ever ready to go, but her body was there. But through all of that, and this always happens to me, my body was going through a massive energetic upgrade. I could feel energy pouring through my spine, pouring through every part of my body, being activated. I've had horrible back pain for the last like 9 months, crippling, can hardly pick a box up, struggled to treat through my practice this winter of like even holding a sheet up for somebody to flip over. I was just in crippling pain. And through this whole process, everything started to like find spaciousness and start to shift on its own. And then things were brought up in my life for me to take action on in the physical world and have conversations around. So it wasn't like this energy poured in through me and healed me while she was going through this and we were doing Reiki. No, that wasn't the case. But it brought stuff up for me to let go of. And it brought in this new energy into my system to be rebirthed with, to bring into the world. But that is a choice. And then with that new energy came these conversations, came, taking initiative and saying I need support and needed a couple sessions to clean some stuff up. And then I needed to go out in my world and take action on the things where I had closed my heart, where I had like exited too early in this process, where I had done these things, right? We still have to take initiative and action in our life and be responsible, like radically responsible if we want to change the narrative. And within 1 week, my back pain, the last week, my back pain is like 95% better. And I have not had that in at least 6 months, 9 months. So just take stock. Where in the cycle are you? How do you move through these transitions? Where are you proud of how you move through these transitions and how you show up for yourself and others in those transitions? Because sometimes we're just forcing what we think needs to happen when that's not the reality. We're being given an opportunity to rewrite the narrative, to heal those triggers and wounds for both people or the person and the dog, whatever, and move forward so that it doesn't show up in the next relationship. I was just diving into Gene Keys this weekend and was reminded it's in the 44th Gene Key is all about karmic relationships. And it's like when we continue to do the same thing, even if we leave that relationship, we're still going to be met in that same thing that triggered us in the next relationship. I used to always think that like the minute something's off, you leave it, you end it, you just clean cut it. So there's no nagging energy. But the truth is we're here to live out those relationships. How long can we stand in them, in our truth, speak our truth, and like move through what's coming through us, through the discomfort, or like sometimes the body's telling us like, fuck this, can't do this, not supposed to be here. Is that your truth? With Reese, is it really her truth that it was her time to go? Or is that my body freaking out and saying, I don't want to be here. I want to get out of this. This is so uncomfortable. I'll do anything for her to not have to be in this and me to not have to be in this, even if it prematurely means ending something. So I'll leave you with that today. That's a whole lot of hopping in and out of different little ponds and places. But I encourage you to really just dive into these places. These are the biggest places that we are given the opportunity to expand through and out of, and also liberate others. Liberate ourselves and how it's always been, how we always, our patterns show up, how we blame ourselves for our patterning. But then also people on the other end that are doing the same thing, we give them an opportunity to liberate out of that. And the choice is always ours. Always. We can't decide how others react. We can't decide how others respond. We can't decide what life hands us. We just get to decide how we show up. And if we've been playing the same cycle 5 times over with 5 different people, maybe it's time to look and say like, oh, when I'm having this conversation again, like, fuck, I'm here again. this person doesn't get me. I need to stand up for myself. True. But can we do it with more love? Can we do it differently? Is there something that we're actually just being mirrored back instead of the other person doing something or the other person, it being them? There's still always a mirror for us. Can we go sit and let our nervous systems come down so that we can gain access to the wisdom and have a bigger capacity to show up in a different way in conversation, in our lives, in our career, all of it. Thanks so much for being here today. I'd love it if you subscribed and left a review. As always, choice is yours. I'll see you soon. Thanks for joining us today. That is it. Be courageous, be bold, let anyone down but yourself along the way as you confidently activate or trigger the correct players in your pinball game. And with an open and defined heart, I encourage you to go forward with curiosity and create the depth and satisfaction in the entirety of your life, the entirety of your career, the entirety of the relationships that your soul came here craving, seeking, destined to create. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love it if you left a review below. You can reach me at thekrystaleffect.com or on Instagram, the.krystal.effect. We'll leave that below.